Hi, this is Scott Garibay. Today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm going to explain to you why Dungeons and Dragons, why at a Dungeons and Dragons table, a physical table, Dungeons and Dragons is currently telling the most valuable, most powerful stories on planet Earth today, and why it has become a medium for valuable, powerful stories that has no near peer, that no other storytelling medium on the planet can even remotely match. Okay, so what I'm saying is that Dungeons and Dragons has surpassed every single form of human narrative, and unlike every other antiquated form of, and also I'm saying that Dungeons and Dragons in 1974 and continued every single year until today, 2022, right, and continuing through to the future, until Dungeons and Dragons is no more, right? That it solely tells stories that have a lesson that can be executed immediately. Not every story told at every D&D table, but I am convinced that every single day, one dungeon master out of probably, I think there are probably about 10 million. The last count came from like 2019, I think. That's a really solid, actually 20. The last count, Dungeons and Dragons said that they Wizards of the Coast specifically estimated that 10 million people are engaging in Dungeons and Dragons. And so I think there's a possibility that out of the 10 million dungeon masters that are out there, every single day a story is told in the right that leverages what I'm about to explain about Dungeons and Dragons, that makes it so that the players at the table have an immediately executable lesson that they can use in their lives that moment to do something that improves their lives, right? And I'm also saying that this is not the case with any other human storytelling method, because they're all so outrageously antiquated compared to what Dungeons and Dragons established in 1974. Now, that's a bold claim. How does Dungeons and Dragons do this? How does Dungeons and Dragons create executable lessons? How does it have the ability to create valuable, powerful stories that have an executable lesson today? Right now, not every D&D table, and story told can do this, but certainly I believe every single day, just from the numbers, at least one dungeon master is doing this. And I think what I'm talking about now happens every single day somewhere in the world, right? And if you pay attention and you understand Dungeons and Dragons can happen at your table. All right, here we go. How does it accomplish this? It accomplishes it through DANTS. DANTS. All right? DANTS. DANTS. All right? DANTS. It accomplishes it through dense, accelerated, narrative, trilateral sourcing. Okay? Let's talk about narrative trilateral sourcing first. Here's why Dungeons and Dragons has antiquated every form of human storytelling, and why it has the most valuable, powerful stories in the world today. The first part of it is narrative trilateral sourcing. Okay, what is it? So Dungeons and Dragons established that the way stories are told, there are three contributors to a story. Okay, this never existed before Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, the artist, that is the dungeon master; the experiencer, that is the Dungeons and Dragons player; and fate, that is the dice. The classic polyhedral set. Okay, and so basically it said the artist frames the world. The artist then, unlike any other form of storytelling in the history of humanity, does not complete the story. They take the story's pillars, they take the story's infrastructure, place it in front of the experiencer, and begin the story. The experiencer then immediately begins reacting to the artist, right? So the Dungeons and Dragons players reacts with the dungeon master, okay? Now, this has been seen in very slight ways in other human storytelling. The play, right? So in a movie, the director cuts the film and puts it in front of the experiencer. Nothing can change in the film based on what the experiencer is communicating through their interaction with the appearing piece. Even a laughter or a frown or tears, right? the creator of movies are antiquated crap compared to what can be done on a Dungeons and Dragons story, right? Some director puts some, pablum up and, puts it out, and then it just goes up in front of people. Like, the experiencers have no ability to change that content, right? Completely antiquated and useless at this point, films, right? That's not the case with Dungeons and Dragons, right? The artist, the dungeon master, puts the story in front of the experiencer, and literally from the first sentence, the dungeon master can change the second sentence based on the smile, the frown, the slightest expression of emotion, right? Can change the story literally from word to word, right? No other medium has ever done this. Plays came close, right? An actor can begin doing the play, right? But they can't change the lines from line to line because their compatriot actors won't know how to form the rest, right? And then the whole thing goes ad hoc, and with very few exceptions, this really isn't never done in plays. However, plays, they can change the delivery of lines, right? And they can adjust their performance based on what they're seeing from the experiencer, right? So that is really unique in Dungeons & Dragons. It goes further. Unlike any other storytelling in human history, fate is involved everywhere, right? Both the experiencer and the artist, both the Dungeons & Dragons player and the dungeon master, are not free to do whatever they want in the story. This is what you will hear people say, oh, Dungeons & Dragons is just pretend. It's like when you played Cops and Robbers when you were a kid. Whenever you hear that, run for the hills. You're dealing with a very shallow, low intelligence and or low visioned commentator, right? And you don't want to listen anymore, right? Because that is a fundamental misunderstanding of Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons specifically tied the narrative to this powerful thing, right? To the power of fate, right? Both the dungeon master and the Dungeons & Dragons player are bound by fate itself. They cannot tell whatever story they want. Fate interposes. This is what links Dungeons & Dragons stories to value and power, right? This is what allows it to immediately give a Dungeons & Dragons player an executable lesson that can be used literally the minute they walk away from the table. They can change their lives. They can get on their phone and change a relationship they had. Or they can get on a phone and make a purchase they didn't make before because they have new wisdom from a valuable, powerful story. No other storytelling medium in the history of humanity has ever been able to do this, right? Or ever even, really more. They always had the ability. Actually, I don't think you had the ability for this before the Gutenberg press. But since the 15th century, this was always possible. But it was never. But there was no one product that had the courage to do this, right? And that products creators who had the courage to do the courage to do this. And Dungeons & Dragons does, right? Dungeons & Dragons has the courage to allow stories for both the artist and the experiencer to be interrupted by fate. It's incredible. It is absolutely incredible. And it is unprecedented. And it is why Dungeons & Dragons has no near peers when it comes to storytelling, right? Anywhere in any medium. It simply just doesn't exist. It's truly incredible. So you have the narrative trilateral source. You have artist, experiencer, and fate itself, okay? Let's talk about dense and accelerated. It's dense, right? So a play is very intimate, far more intimate than a video game or a movie, right? Dungeons & Dragons goes farther and it says 1 dungeon master, 4 Dungeons & Dragons players. This is going to be intimate. The dungeon master needs to understand the people at the table to tell these stories. And their IRL concerns and their IRL conditions can immediately be leveraged by the dungeon master to craft the story, right? That is unprecedented. Plays came close. Not video games and movies have never come close. Video games and movies cannot come anywhere close to accomplishing what can be done with a Dungeons & Dragons story, right? And because they're dense, because there are literally people packed around a table. Five people. It puts them close, which means the dungeon master sees every expression, sees every response to the story. Okay? Accelerated, right? The dungeon master can react at the speed of thought. No other human storytelling method has ever allowed this speed, right? No creator could ever change the path of a story within literally an eye blink. It is accelerated, and it goes from week to week to week, right? And this is much faster production for storytelling than any novelist has ever been able to do, much faster storytelling than any movie production has ever been able to do, and much faster distribution and real storytelling than has ever been able to be accomplished in video games, or will ever be able to be accomplished in video games, or in the novel, or in film. All forms of human storytelling are pure and utter dross. They are chaff, right? Dungeons & Dragons has the wheat. All the other antiquated storytelling methods of the world are now useless, right? Are now useless compared to Dungeons & Dragons, right? For those who don't know Dungeons & Dragons and aren't engaged with Dungeons & Dragons, or don't understand what Dungeons & Dragons is, they still have use there to them, right? But if you understand Dungeons & Dragons, you understand why Dungeons & Dragons is the only human storytelling method available today that can actually deliver a fully executable lesson immediately, right? That can be executed directly after the experience, right? Not every instance of Dungeons & Dragons, meets this level of quality and value and power, but many do, and you can get there too if you understand Dungeons & Dragons and if you understand DANTS. Dense, accelerated, narrative, trilateral sourcing. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear yours. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.